I'll be on top again. I'm not gonna let you take me down. It's gonna be the whole 9 yards or nothing.
Hi, welcome to Legal Straight Talk. I'm Tom Mealy from the Harrison Law Group, and once again, we're back with another great show. This time, we're going to be talking about Long Island, and we have with us today Mike Kaufman. Now, Mike is he's in private practice. He's an attorney. He also has a tremendous background in engineering. He is on the board of the Suffolk County Planning Commissioner and also helped develop the master plan for Long Island. Now, the last time Mike was on the show, we talked about his master plan and all that Long Island has in store. However, today, we're going to talk about something different. You know, we're coming into the summer, and with the summer months comes insects. And with insects breeds disease. With disease requires pesticides. And with pesticides, you're going to hear those planes and those helicopters going over again once more with the mosquitoes and the West Nile virus. So tonight we're going to talk about how this is going to affect us here on Long Island, and it's my pleasure to introduce and welcome back Mr. Mike Kaufman. Thanks for coming back again.
Thank you very much, Tom. Glad to be here.
Mosquitoes, I got to tell you, nasty little things.
They bite. What can I say?
They do. You know, we see these helicopters going over. We see the people talk about the pesticides that's being dropped in order to kill these mosquitoes. I want to start off first by asking the question that I ask a lot of people. Is this for real?
It is for real. It's about $5 million a year. We spent about $5 million developing a master plan to deal with all of it. And there's massive efforts underway from helicopters to vehicles to scientists to laboratories to you name it, we got it. I mean, we have boats out there. We have dredging equipment out there to try and control the mosquito problems. And the trick to all of it is to try and control them basically before they get on the wing. We like to get them, bluntly, while they're little babies. And I know that sounds terrible.
Well, I've never seen a baby mosquito. You know, I mean, I've always seen the full size. But let's back up for a second, because I want to really approach this very slowly as far as, you know, back when I was a kid, we never heard of West Nile virus. Mosquitoes, is a mosquito the only insect that carries West Nile?
Well, mosquitoes are basically composed of a lot of different species. And certain species, Culex species, Culex pippins, things like that, Culex selenarius, and Aedes aegypti, they all are very, very efficient carriers of some of the more, shall we say, lethal diseases out there. You've got West Nile, which is a recently emerged disease out here. West Nile comes from, literally, the Middle East. And somehow or other, about, I don't know, called the year 2000 or so, it suddenly popped up in Blindberg Park in Suffolk County, in my hometown. And it sort of spread all over the county, and then it sort of spread all over the country. You also have Eastern equine encephalitis, which is a terrible, terrible disease to get. It's pretty much suppressed. There's also malaria out here. There's not nearly as much as there once was. We've only had 2 cases in the last few years. There's a lot of diseases out there. Through the years, the vector control programs have been able to suppress a lot of those.
All these diseases,
out there now.
They're carried by insects.
They're carried by mosquitoes.
Mosquitoes. Now, mosquito, you know, it lands on you, and everybody knows that nasty little bump in the itch that you wind up getting. Mosquitoes, they live on, obviously, the blood or the, what's it called, the lymph from humans.
Yeah.
The
Blood
moisture.
meals.
Yeah. So, you know, a mosquito lands on you, it draws blood, it puts its needle into your skin, and then it attempts to draw blood from you. The West Nile, the virus itself, obviously, as soon as that mosquito lands and inserts that needle into your skin,
You're infected.
You're infected. You said it came from West Nile, from the Middle East.
Yeah.
And it started in Smithtown, New York.
At least in the United States. That's where we think it started.
Okay. Let's talk about that. How did this happen? Do we know anything about it?
Nobody really knows how it's gotten here, but ever since Columbus landed in the New World, we've had an exchange of diseases and populations and plants and things like that from the New World to the Old World and from the Old World to the New World. For example, potatoes and tomatoes are New World vegetables, yet they are staples right now in the Old World. That's sweet potatoes, the same thing. They came from the Americas. So we've had a lot of stuff go over there. Now, unfortunately, the Old World has given us a lot of these diseases. Malaria, which came from the Old World, I think it was Africa, was the home of it, and now it's endemic in South America and Central America and places like that. Recently we've had, again, West Nile show up. Eastern equine has not fortunately gone over to the Old World, but there's a lot of exchange of populations. Well, the medfly. If you remember back in the 1970s, the medfly was going to destroy California. Mediterranean fly. Somehow or other, it came over, maybe in somebody's luggage, maybe in a packing case, something like that. Here on Long Island, we have this pine borer, and that's actually the wrong name for it, but it's a boring type of beetle, and it's destroying pine trees and maples and all sorts of things like that. It probably came from China. That's originally its home, and it probably came in packing cases or something like that. I know the last time I was in Antigua, down in the Caribbean, if you hopped over to St. Martin, which is visible across the bay over there, what is it, 6 miles or something like that, they spray the living daylights out of everything with an insecticide because St. Martin has some diseases that Antigua doesn't want to have. So there are these kinds of exchanges, and they just come from out of nowhere, and it just happens.
They're coming from somewhere, and I mean the obvious thing is that we can't control what comes into the United States. I mean, fully. I mean, like you said, they can come in luggage, they can come in a million different ways, but the bottom line is they're here, and they're here to stay. For the most part.
There's no way of getting rid of this stuff.
The only thing we can do is basically control it. The West Nile, and I keep referring back to West Nile and the mosquito, because that's what most people on Long Island, they really know. What is the probability of being infected? Let's back up. What is the probability of being infected with West Nile but not knowing about it? And then versus what is the probability of being infected with West Nile and having to be hospitalized for it?
It's a pretty low transmission rate. It's also, to put it bluntly, a lot of people can have it and not know it. But some people, for whatever reason, genetic, their blood, who knows, some people do get the terrible encephalitis from it, and they become paralyzed. I've met some of the victims, and it's a terrible, terrible disease. But basically, it's not like you should be afraid to go outside. I'm outside on my own property all the time. I use some DEET. 1 out of basically about 100, maybe 2 out of 100 cases when you get bit and the bug is carrying the West Nile. 2 out of those cases, 1 out of those cases you'll get infected, and then there's a smaller population of that will actually come down with something. So it's a relatively low transmission rate, but the problem is, 1, it's there, and 2, if the county doesn't do the suppression efforts, the mosquito populations are ridden with this stuff. Most mosquito populations do not have this stuff in their bloodstreams. They're not able to infect. But basically, if the suppression efforts, the helicopters, the boats, the spray trucks, etc., weren't there, you'd have a much larger population containing this stuff, and then the rates of transmission go up. Now, I've seen this in Central America and South America.
Are these mosquitoes born with this?
No. There's actually a transmission cycle. You've got, basically, you've got your larvae, which breed in the high marshes and freshwater marshes and in the roots of trees and things like that, any place where it's basically wet. And then they sort of grow up, they become little babies, they get on the hoof, if you will. They escape wherever they were born, and they find a blood meal in a host, which is usually a crow. That's why the crow populations crashed around here. They were very
That was my next question. Why so much with the birds and the crow?
Those were the reservoirs for the disease. For some reason, they carry the disease. A lot of the crows died off, but a lot of them were resistant, but still carry it. So the bugs bite the birds. Birds are often bitten by mosquitoes. Even as they eat the stuff, they're often bitten. And then the bug basically has caught West Nile from an infected crow. But not every crow is infected. Okay, most of the ones that are really susceptible are now gone. The ones that are out there, well, they carry it, but there's not as many. They basically, they fly around, get bitten, and the mosquitoes then go out in search of another blood meal. And these are the female mosquitoes.
Let me get this straight.
So you got a transmission cycle.
So it's not the mosquito that has the West Nile, it's the crows.
The birds are the carriers, but they can't infect people.
But right, because obviously,
Yeah, I haven't
because
seen a
they're not
bird.
gonna, they're gonna,
Unless you're in the
come-
movie The Birds.
Right. So mosquitoes die off in the winter, correct? Okay. So, I mean, they don't lay dormant in the winter in some sort
No,
of
you've got
state
eggs.
where they
You've
come
got
back.
eggs someplace.
Okay. So the mosquitoes that make it, let's say, up until November, December, come December, January, is it fair to say that most or all of the mosquitoes that may have carried West Nile during the summer are now dead?
Yeah, mosquitoes don't live that long, but the basic transmission time is, say, late August, sometimes earlier August, September, and October. After that, it pretty much falls off precipitously. And once you
but
get a
if those
frost, then the
babies,
mosquitoes
if
are
those
gone.
baby mosquitoes are not going after the crows that are infected, then isn't it safe to say that
You can't break
if
the transmission cycle, though, that way. They go after birds, is what happens.
But you're saying the crows are the ones that are carrying.
Crows are
this.
the primary ones. There's other.
Oh,
there's
others.
There's other
Okay.
stuff out there. But
So
the
they
crows
go
are the
after
ones-
they go after the birds, and obviously,
Whatever's warm-blooded.
so the bird is actually carrying this disease. So the disease was brought over by a bird.
No. It's carried by the mosquitoes, but there's sort of a cycle that goes on. Okay, the bugs bite the birds. The bugs get infected. Then they bite other birds, and they infect other birds. And then some other mosquito comes along and bites the infected bird, and basically comes over and bites us in search of another blood meal so that they can brood over and produce more little baby bugs. So there's cycles
That's
within
amazing.
cycles within
That's
cycles.
amazing. What do we do to people out there that love the outdoors like myself? I mean, I love being outside. I love being in the wooded areas, in the country, and so on. And obviously, that's where a lot of mosquitoes are. What can we do to protect ourselves against this?
There's two things you can do: personal protection and municipal protection. The personal protection is wear something containing DEET. That generally scares off the bugs. Wear heavier clothing. Don't go out at dusk and dawn when the bugs are really
Well, let's
out
face
there.
it. I mean, most of us, during the summertime, if it's 8, 9 o'clock at night and it's still 80 degrees, we want to be outside, and we're certainly not
And
going to be
that's when
wearing
you're
a winter
gonna.
coat.
That's when you get more of a
So,
chance
so
of
we
being
have
bit.
to spray ourselves down with this chemical DEET.
Yeah,
which is
I
the
mean, but
chemical.
It's in off. It's in a
All
whole
right,
bunch
so
of
we
other
have that.
things.
What is Suffolk County doing? Suffolk and Nassau County doing to help control this?
Okay, it's called suppression with a little bit of active measure. Suppression basically is dropping larvicide to catch the little babies before they really get born, before they develop in. They're basically eggs and then little swimmers in the water, and then they become little baby bugs once they molt. We're trying to catch them while they're basically swimming in the water, brooding in the water.
So you're trying to eliminate the mosquito population?
Yeah,
is
we
what
try
you're trying to do.
not eliminate it. You'll never do that. And listen, mosquitoes. Well, insect populations are very, very important. So we can't do a nuclear attack on everything. I mean, if you did something like that, you kill off all the bees, the butterflies, basis of food chains, things like that. Our crops depend upon that. You got to do targeted attacks upon the habitat where these things live with very, very specific chemicals that have limited impact on anything outside of the target organism that you're going for. So you drop it in the marshes. You drop it in the freshwater marshes. It's harder to get them while they're in the trees and things like that. But you drop the larvicides. So you're trying to suppress the population before it starts. And then we have chemicals that are very, very effective
Has it
at
been
that.
successful?
Yes. Frankly, until the 1930s, you had endemic malaria out here. You had yellow fever out here. You had people dying of malaria. You had Tripoli all over the place, which is a horrible, horrible disease. St. Louis encephalitis. You name it, there was stuff out here. The suppression efforts that the county did back in the 1930s really eliminated that threat, and that made, frankly, the South Shore much more habitable. Before that, you couldn't really live in certain areas. You couldn't live close to the marshes. Now, I'm not saying that the efforts that they undertook in the 1930s were right. They blew apart marshes, destroyed food chains, and the marshes are some of the most critical
That's all they
habitats
knew
we
back
have.
then. I mean,
That's all
obviously,
they knew. Nowadays, we attack with chemicals, and I know a lot of environmentalists don't like the chemicals. I've had a lot of battles over that one. As long as you're careful with them, and I'm the one who insisted upon strict protocols for this when we were developing the master plan for all of this, and I got my way, as I usually do on this stuff. As long as it's a targeted approach, you knock them off basically. And I'm just saying that because it sounds interesting, but you knock them off basically at the larval level. But that's the first situation. A lot of bugs do get out. You can't nuke the entire
No,
county.
well, of course
I mean,
not. Of course not.
we're 563,000 acres.
Have they ever thought about trying to somehow eliminate the disease or within the birds without killing the birds? Is there any way of doing that?
No.
I mean,
There's no
obviously,
antidote or anything like that.
there's no antidote.
We don't really even have a vaccine for it.
So in other words, if I wind up with West Nile for whatever reason, I get bit, there's no vaccine?
There's no vaccine.
So how do you cure it?
Well, frankly, if you really are in dire straits, you're in the hospital and they're giving you interferon, they're giving you blood exchanges, things like that. They're trying to prevent swelling on the brain because basically an encephalitis is the destruction of the brain. But that's outside. I mean, it's very, very rare. Every year you have 5 or 6 people die.
But one of us out there,
60, 70 people get injured.
It's going to happen.
It does happen.
Somebody on Long Island this year will die as a result
5 or 6
of West
generally.
Nile.
And when control fails, and control has failed a couple of times, not in my county, but control has failed. And when it did fail, the death rates rose. The people who got infected rose tremendously.
How many people died in Suffolk County last year in the West Nile?
Just a couple.
2. Nassau
Okay.
County?
I don't remember the number.
More than
I don't-
2?
I think less because they were pretty good last year.
Okay, so this whole thing is based on the master plan on dropping pesticide in order to help control the population.
Well,
of
larvicide,
mosquitoes.
not pesticide.
Well,
But
larvicide.
now here's the other part of the program. To put it bluntly, West Nile is endemic out there. When the little babies break containment, okay, that's the technical word for it, break containment, and get out into the wide world, they generally fly a couple of miles away and then sort of roost in the area. They fly away from their birthplaces. So they might be born in the marshes, but they're going to be
They could be inland.
Yeah, they'll be inland in the LIE. They could be born in South Islip and move. When that happens, there's an active surveillance program, okay? And we have lots of traps and things like that, and hundreds of bugs get caught every day. And basically, they are sent to a laboratory, and the lab is able to identify whether there's West Nile contamination in this particular population. If there is significant West Nile population, a number of factors come into play, but in a worst case scenario, that's when you get the helicopters coming out spraying at dusk and at dawn. They'll be spraying pesticides, adulticides they're called. They're not the most savory chemicals in the world, but from a public health perspective, which is where I come from on this, I mean, I fully acknowledge the environmental impacts.
What is the
But there's
environmental impact?
You can destroy non-target species.
Can
You
it
can
affect the
destroy-
food?
No.
If it lands on the crops, can it affect the crops?
I'd wash it off, but generally, no. Really, we
mean,
don't spray
pretty
it. We
much
don't
you
spray it
should
on.
wash
We
all
only
your-
we only spray it in the upper
marsh
wetlands,
areas.
in the
Okay.
in the wetlands, marshes, things like that. We try and stay away from food places. If somebody doesn't want to be on the spray list, things like that. But getting back to my point a moment ago, adulticiding is necessary when you have a substantial amount of West Nile out in this particular area. Let's say in Smithtown. Or a Middle Island or something like that. That's why you see hot spots, and that's when the red alerts go off, and they drop the adulticides dusk and dawn, and they try and eliminate as many of the bugs as you can, etc. But that's the worst case scenario. So normally, what would happen is you try and suppress the bugs more locally. You let people know that they're out there. But the county's 563,000 acres. You don't spray the entire area. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we spray such limited areas of the county. It's not funny. It's not like we're going out there and just doing a wave of assaults from one side to the other like they did in Nassau
why
a
not?
couple of years ago. It's dangerous. It's not needed if you do it right. If your containment totally breaks down, then you do need to do it. Nassau had to do that a few years ago when their containment broke down. Basically, the bugs got out into the open, and they were everywhere on the South Shore, and the county just literally did a swath, about 10 miles wide. They borrowed all of Suffolk's equipment, and they just literally, as I say, nuked the entire county with this stuff. People were indoors, people were scared about it, but you know something? You have to balance
The
the environmental...
population dropped. If you're saying Suffolk had 2 and Nassau County had less than
But
us,
those-
then it worked.
Yeah, it did work, but those numbers are exactly that low because of the active suppression that's going on. So you can't... A lot of people judge it, only 2 people died. Well, if you didn't have the measures that were going on...
10,
you-
15 people died.
A lot more. Now, I lived in Central America and South America. Okay, I picked up malaria myself. I also picked up hepatitis a long time ago. Fortunately, I'm clear of both of them. But I've seen the breakdowns of public health. I have seen entire villages laid low with this stuff. I've seen yellow fever. I've seen... It's horrible to see this kind of stuff. It really does exist out there. I've had every inoculation you've ever can imagine. I'm never allowed to give blood. I can't even go within 100 yards of a blood drawing station. Okay, simply because of everything that I've had pumped into my body. But I've seen the breakdowns, what can happen. I have literally sat in a field, popped a flare, and seen rabid bats on the backs of meat cows, of cows being raised by meat, for meat. And the campesinos were under their nets, and the bats were biting the people also. Stuff like that happens. Okay, it doesn't happen up here in the United States. We're very, very safe, but we're also very, very coddled. Nobody gets that. My point is, we have very, very low numbers, but those are artificial numbers precisely because we're doing active suppression. There are costs to it.
Sure.
Okay, there are benefits to it also. It's a weighing process.
I guess that it's obviously, what Suffolk and NASA are doing is it's needed. There's no question of, why should we, or not doing it, we have to do this in order to keep it down. You're in your backyard, you're in the comforts of your own backyard. What can we use to protect our own backyard? I know that they make this chemical in Home Depot or at Lowe's where you can spray it around the perimeter of your yard. Does that really
Some of it
help?
works. I mean, you have the propane cookers which put out carbon dioxide, and the bugs are attracted to that, and they go into the little traps. My brother has 2 or 3 of those around the property. There's things you can do.
Should you
Basically,
have
we're
your
deep.
property sprayed? I know that, a good company here on Long Island, Olson's, sprays, they come to my house and they spray all the trees and the shrubs. Should
Yeah, but that's for
we-
different things.
But do they have, well, it keeps the bugs away.
It does to some degree. I'm not an advocate of spraying the living daylights out of areas. Look, if you live in the woods like I do, you're going to have a few more bugs. If you live out in the open areas, okay, main streets of Islip, main population centers of Islip, or Patchogue, or main areas of Huntington, you're not going to have that many bugs. You're going to be okay. But if you live on larger properties and there's swaths of green in the area and then parks nearby, yeah, you're going to have repositories of bugs. They are going to come out. Should you be fearful? No way. The chances of transmission while present are extremely low. And as long as you're careful, you're going to be okay. I'm not trying to spread fear or anything like that.
No, but I just want people to understand that, listen, we live on an island, we're surrounded by water, there are marshlands, this exists.
Yeah.
In your own home, I guess the best thing we can tell people is standing water has got to be
Yes.
eliminated.
That's where the bugs breed and deposit their
I know
eggs.
that, I notice a lot of times, on garbage cans, the lids in the garbage cans, because they're a little down, I've seen those things sit on garbage cans for weeks.
Yeah. Well,
They'll drop in there.
I've got a perfect example. I have a pool at home, and I haven't used it in about 2 years, and it's filled with leaves, and it's kind of ugly brown and green, and there's things
And
growing
there's no
in it.
cover on it.
There's no cover on it because my
It's a
pool,
breeding ground for these mosquitoes.
except for one thing. I throw BTI in there every year, and I never have any bugs coming out of there.
What is BTI?
BTI is a pathogen, basically, that kills the mosquito larva. And basically, you throw a couple of sticks of that into the standing water. My pool's about 50,000 gallons. No bugs. Also, I have a lot of frogs living in there right now, so they eat all the larvae.
Okay,
So that kind
all
of
right.
helps. But that's what you do. You
that's good.
eliminate your standing water. You eliminate the habitats. You do what you have to do.
Moisture in trees, anything that
Well,
you could-
moisture
you
in
just
trees
don't-
are no. That's not an issue.
It's not.
No.
You mentioned that, but they could live in the moisture
They
in the trees.
no. They live in the root systems of
In
the
the root
trees, and
systems,
that's where
okay.
triple E is found. Okay, which is another deadly encephalitis.
Very
And
interesting.
that's where that particular breed of bug likes to hang out. That's why triple E, you can never eliminate it wholly. It loves red oak swamps. It loves wet tree bottoms and things like that. Any park where there's water and there's trees nearby, it's going to like that kind
About
of
salt
habitat.
water. Are they attracted to salt water?
Triple E, not so much. West Nile, they're in the high marshes. They don't necessarily love it. They're also in the freshwater marshes. Depends upon the breed of bug.
But on Long Island, should we, I know that we should be concerned about some of the park areas, obviously, where there's marshes.
Yeah.
But let's talk about
Just
the
be
average
careful.
residential home. I live in West Islip, I live down near the water. Most of that water has a salt base to it, because it's coming off the Great South Bay. But is there, could mosquitoes live in the salty,
A lot of them
fresh
breed
water
in the brackish water. They'll breed in the high marsh. They'll breed in the middle marshes, things like that. That's why the county sprays the edges of the marsh. No one likes to go into the main marsh. That's not really where the bugs are when they're larvae. When they grow up, they're all over the place. And they do move. They'll move a mile or two a day. Or sometimes they'll just come in and just hang out. The trick is, again, be careful.
You
be
see,
wise
you
about
see,
all this
you
stuff.
see a bird on your property, a dead
Don't
crow.
shoot it. Don't shoot it.
No. If it's dead, I mean, who should we call?
Nobody at this point in time. Everyone, the science community knows that crows are one of the repositories for West Nile. They're a carrier. Not the only carrier. A lot of other birds carry it, but crows are kind of an indicator species. So everyone knows it. We all know that
So
West Nile's
if you
out
see
here,
a
so don't
crow
bother
dead
about
in your
it.
driveway, don't make a phone call?
I'm not going to do anything. Not really. I mean, you can call up the Department of Health. They will note it. They'll put it into their maps, and if they see it, if there's if there's a ton of dead crows,
This is
they'll
behind
look.
the scenes. You guys are doing one heck of a job.
$5 million and 3 years of my life.
So it's not something that we really need to be concerned about. I can honestly say for the first time that I think that the counties are doing what needs to be done in order to protect us out there, and they're doing it according to you, and I trust you based on our conversation the last time you were on the show. You seem like a straight
My
shooter.
EIS was not challenged.
As somebody who's involved with the master plan for Suffolk County and the Suffolk County Planning Commissioner, and I mean, you know what's going on, and I can honestly say that I feel a lot better going in, because that was always a fear of mine with this West Nile. I always had a problem with it. And I feel better going into the summertime knowing
Just be careful.
that the county's got this under control.
Basically,
And I don't
yeah.
say that often.
It's well, the county takes a lot of hits. Now, I'm a private attorney. Okay, I'm not paid by the county. I just have special
No, I hear you.
skill sets to do all this, and I'm appointed to these positions because I'm somewhat rational most of the time, and I'm able to judge a lot of these things, and I don't have a predetermined agenda. So, piggybacking on what you're saying, there's a lot of people like me out there, and then there's the professionals, and we sort of melded together to get this environmental impact statement and the master plan together to try and, again, protect the residents. It's what it boils down to,
Absolutely
be
incredible.
careful. And like I said, call in about crows, but it's not going to be as if it's a monumental event or anything like that.
We're going to have you on in a couple of weeks with Brett Harrison. Give us a little prelude of what you're going to be talking about. We got about 30 seconds.
Well, it's the new type of housing that you're going to be seeing on Long Island, the new places that you're going to be seeing, transit-oriented development, because the island is changing. There's a generational shift going on in terms of population. To put it bluntly, it used to be from 1946 when the suburbs got invented
Leviton
until 1990, everybody wanted to come out to the island.
Right.
Single-family housing with nice green lawns.
Right.
Ever since around 1990, there's been the young don't want that.
So
They
the,
want
so
to live
the
in a
island
city.
is going to change.
The island is changing in terms of
Okay.
planning.
Well, I want to thank you once again for tuning in to Legal Straight Talk. Don't miss this show with Brett Harrison and Mike Kaufman. They're going to be talking about the changes that are going to go on here on Long Island, and these changes are coming quick. So tune in next week for another episode of Legal Straight Talk. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful week. Be safe. We'll see you next week.
Hi, I'm Jerry Parisi. Join Tom Mealy and Tommy Marr right here on Cablevision Channel 20 each week for an interesting episode of The Long Island View.